Hailing from Ireland, the Cranberries would be the largest musical export from the country since U2. The band's first two albums, which were released in the early 90s, would be massive sellers, but by the later part of the decade, the band was on the brink of collapse. Cancelled tours and controversy led to the band falling apart almost a decade after taking over the world. The band would re-emerge in 2009 until it all came crashing down almost a decade later, resulting in the end of one of the most successful alternative bands of the last 3 decades. Brought up in a strict Catholic household, the Cranberries' Dolores O'Riordan was born in 1971 and grew up in a 2-bedroom cottage in the countryside, about 5 miles outside of the Irish city of Limerick, in a town called Ballybricken. The youngest of 7 children, including 5 boys and 1 girl, her dad was an ex-farm laborer who suffered a serious bike accident, leaving him unable to work. Her mother wanted Dolores to get a college degree and become a music teacher. Despite growing up around a lot of family, darkness was also present in her childhood. She would reveal years later that she suffered trauma at the hands of one older man, and at the age of 7, witnessed her sister accidentally burning down her family's home. She would famously tell Rolling Stone magazine in 1995, "I have a lot of secrets about my childhood." Growing up in a home of mostly men, she offered Rolling Stone her assessment of Irish culture, saying, "My mom always had a softer spot for boys, as a lot of Irish women do. You'd have to sing or wear a pretty dress, but boys could just sit there and be brilliant for sitting there and being boys. It makes you that little bit more forward, pushy. I was singing always." It would result in O'Riordan growing up as a tomboy and spending most of her life around boys, since there really weren't a lot of girls where she lived. And popular music wasn't a part of her life either, as she had a pretty strict upbringing, being more influenced by traditional Irish and classical and church music. Recalling to the same magazine, "I played the church organ for about 8 years and did a lot of Gregorian hymns and chants. Not a lot of young people do that anymore. Where I grew up, there isn't even a town, but you had the church." At the age of 5, her nursery headmistress would stand up O'Riordan on the piano in the class and asked her to sing for her whole class, and this was something that continued well into her teenage years. After learning the piano, O'Riordan would write her first song at the age of 12 called "Calling." She would admit to Rolling Stone the song was about her 12-year-old self having a crush on a much older man. She would soon become known as the girl in school who, and I quote, "wrote songs." While she would never stray too far from her conservative upbringing in her later teen years, she did discover one thing that had a profound impact on her songwriting, and that would be her relationships that she had with the opposite sex. She would admit to Siren magazine, "The way I see it is that a boy will tell you how mad he is about you, and when you start telling him how you feel, he acts differently. They can't take anything seriously, really," she'd say. In 1990, she would hear from a friend that a local band named Cranberry Sauce, if you say the band's name quickly enough, it sounds like cranberry sauce, they were looking to replace their newly departed singer, a male named Niall Quinn. Up until this point, Cranberry Sauce were a novelty act with songs that included "Throw Me Down a Big Stairs" and "Good Morning God." O'Riordan and Cranberry Sauce seemed like a match made in heaven. O'Riordan wrote her own songs, had an incredible voice, and Cranberry Sauce wanted a female singer to fit their new shimmering, dreamy sound. The band was made up of brothers Noel and Mike Hogan on guitar and bass, and an old schoolmate of theirs, drummer Fergal Lawler. For brothers Noel and Mike, they would meet their drummer in Limerick, who shared a similar interest in music with them. Believe it or not, by the time the trio met up, the hottest craze in Ireland was breakdancing. The 1984 Hollywood film Breakin' convinced young Irish kids to buy tracksuits and boomboxes, with Hogan remembering. "There's a big park in the center of Limerick, and every Saturday all the breakdancers would go up there and boogie away the day." For O'Riordan, she would lug her keyboard across Limerick at the age of 18 for the audition, while wearing a pink tracksuit, with Hogan recalling, "Dolores came and sang a few songs she had written. We were blown away that this small girl from Limerick had such an amazing voice. The fact that she wasn't already in a band was a miracle," he'd say. O'Riordan would tell the Morning Call newspaper her recollection of the audition, saying, "The songs they had at the time were not my taste, but I saw the potential in the playing. It was easy for me because I knew no matter what their first impression was, that the minute I opened my mouth, they were going to be impressed," she'd say. O'Riordan would leave the audition with an instrumental track that consisted of 4 looping chords. She would return a week later with lyrics and the melody written to the song, clinching the audition. That song that the group first worked on would be "Linger," which would be one of the Cranberries' biggest hits. The lyrics would be inspired by O'Riordan's first boyfriend, a 17-year-old soldier who broke her heart, writing her lovesick letters while being deployed to the war-torn country of Lebanon. By O'Riordan's own admission, she thought the style of personal and emotional music that she was writing would probably never find an audience in Ireland, revealing to Siren magazine in 1992, "The music was so emotional, I found that I could only write about personal things. I was sure that it would be considered soppy teenage crap, especially in Limerick, because most bands are really young men, and their lyrics are humorous or mad. They don't go pouring their hearts out," she'd say. After hearing Linger in its finished form, the band knew they had a different sound. They continued to write more songs, with Dolores and Noel forming a songwriting partnership. The band soon turned their attention on recording a demo that they could shop around to record labels. The band would be helped out by a local musician named Pierce Gilmore, who owned a local studio named Zurich, which allowed the Cranberries to record their first demo, a 4-track EP named Water Circle. It was during this time the band played their first show at a place called Ruby's, a basement club in a hotel in Limerick, with Lala recalling to Rolling Stone, "We just went up and we had 6 songs. Dolores was turned to the side. Noel, Mike, and I had our heads down. It was just, okay, let's get this over with, and that'll be it. We had some music together, we had Linger and Sunday, but really some of our songs hardly had words." After recording the group's demo, guitarist Noel Hogan quit his job fixing cash registers and started working on sending out the group's demos to labels and radio stations. It would be an employee who worked at the Zurich studios where the band would cut their demo who provided Hogan with the addresses of the record labels. When one of the demo tapes was sent back to the band, it was addressed to the Cranberries, and thus the band's name was changed. The record labels would end up biting at the demo, with Rough Trade Records being the first label to show interest in the group, followed by Virgin, Island, and EMI. The onslaught of record label responses resulted in all the members quitting their day jobs. The band soon found themselves playing a showcase at a local university, resulting in reps from those labels flying in from London to watch this performance. O'Riordan would recall to the LA Times, "We had been together 6 months and had just 6 songs to our name, and 32 record company people flew in to see us, and we were afraid for our lives. I'd never heard the term record company until I was 18, she'd say. The band would end up signing with U2's label Island Records. One of the strangest moves the band would make was who they hired as their manager. The band had some issues with their management early on, resulting in their debut album being delayed. They would hire Jeff Travis, the head of Rough Trade Records, who had tried signing the band. The group had negotiated with him prior to signing with Island and were impressed with him. Once the news came of the band signing with Island, they were soon gaining buzz from the British press throughout the summer and fall of 1991, even though they hadn't put out their first major label release. Their first release for Island Records would be an EP titled Uncertain, which came out in the autumn of 1991. The EP would be released under the name Zurich Records. The band soon hit the road, playing a number of 3-week-long tours across England, supporting a variety of bands including Suede and Duran Duran. But they soon ran into problems. Their live performances needed work, and life on the road proved to be difficult. With Noel Hogan recalling to Rolling Stone, "We weren't very good live. We used to stand there very, very still, and things always went wrong. Things exploded all the time. Dolores would have to sleep across our laps at night in the van," he'd say. By early 1992, the Cranberries once again entered Zurich Studios with Pierce Gilmore to record their first full-length record for Island. The initial sessions proved to be unsuccessful and led to Gilmore being fired from the project. The band was unhappy over Gilmore adding dance beats and industrial-style guitar to their mixes, and he would be replaced by Morrissey producer Stephen Street. It would result in their major label debut. 1993's Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We? The album's first single, Dreams, gained traction at college and alternative rock stations, and within 3 months of being released as a single, the song showed up on the Modern Rock Tracks chart and MTV, and soon started playing the video for the song on its program 120 Minutes and the Alternative Nation. The label's strategy from the start was to build up momentum on college and alternative radio. From there, the label will contact stations and video programs in those markets to see what could be done to expand the band's reach. The label provided sampler cassettes with the songs Dreams and snippets of several other tracks to independent retailers and smaller chains. The cassettes would be also provided at concerts and events that the label thought would have people who might like the Cranberries. The label would also send out postcards to thousands of people they lifted from magazine subscription lists. But the label was really careful of one thing, not marketing the band's name with any food tie-ins. Matt Stringer, who was Island Records' senior VP of marketing, would tell Billboard magazine, "One of our biggest concerns as we produce merchandising items was to make sure we kept them very specific to music. Do a cassette, not a cranberry sauce. Mail a postcard, don't send out Ocean Spray cranberry juice. It was a conscious decision to not be kitschy," he'd say. Everybody Else wasn't initially a huge success in Europe. 1 year after its release and the reissue of singles Dreams and Linger, and the fact that the album became a huge hit in America, it finally went to #1 in the UK. O'Riordan would tell the LA Times, "It's very difficult to break in Europe unless you break in England, and it's very difficult to break in England if you're Irish." And why is because of history, basically. Also, we weren't from Dublin, so we had all the odds against us when we started, which is why we went to London, where people recognize a different voice and a band that writes good pop songs, she'd say. Everybody Else became the most successful debut record from an Irish band, even beating out U2's Boy. The record sold upwards of 6 million copies worldwide, 4 million of those coming from America. O'Riordan will tell the LA Times, "The first album was written over a period of 2 years, at ages 19 and 20, with your first big relationships and experience in the world as a young woman, moving out of home, getting signed to a record company, and blah blah blah." Even before the group's debut album broke big, the band had already written some of their second album while on the road. The Cranberries would avoid the sophomore jinx, as their follow-up No Need to Argue would prove to be a bigger hit than their first record. Lawler and Hogan would tell Forbes where they felt the pressure came from the first album's success, with Hogan saying, "It didn't change for us. I think we were tighter going in because we had toured so much and playing at the time that we went in with Steven and certainly felt more confident about it. We had matured as musicians. I think we felt pretty good about it going in from the top," he'd say. Hogan would credit the band's live experience as contributing to their heavier sound on their sophomore album. The demos for their second album would be recorded at the Magic Shop in New York City. One of the songs that Dolores would bring into those sessions was tentatively titled In Your Head. Later renamed Zombie, it would be the biggest song of the Cranberries' career, with Noel Hogan telling Forbes his initial thoughts about hearing the demo. "It was a change in direction sound-wise, obviously a lot harder than anything we've done. Dolores brought it in and she was playing it on acoustic. We started doing what we normally do and made it kind of a sweet indie pop thing. It was one of those times where she said, 'Look, that's not going to really work with this. It's a kind of I'm pissed off song. I'm angry about this, and I think the music should reflect this.' So she wanted me to play harder on the guitar and certainly on the drums as well. When we did Zombie, we realized that you can actually be heavy and still have melody." Released as the first single from their new album in September of 1994, Zombie was an anti-war anthem that took aim at the religious and nationalistic violence in Northern Ireland, also known as the Troubles. By this point in time, the violence in Northern Ireland was relentless and occurring almost on a weekly basis. By the time the song was written, almost 3,500 people had died and tens of thousands were injured in more than 3 decades of conflict. There would be one incident in particular that inspired the creation of the song, and that occurred on March 20th, 1993. Explosives hidden under a garbage can in the city of Warrington in northwestern England took the lives of a 3-year-old and 12-year-old boy and injured dozens of others. The two boys had gone shopping on one of the town's busiest streets, and at the same point in time, the Cranberries were on tour in the UK, and frontwoman Dolores O'Riordan was on the band's tour bus in London when she heard the news. It was something that would stick with her for the next little while, and almost 2.5 decades after writing this song, O'Riordan would look back at it saying, "I remember at the time there were a lot of bombs going off in London and the Troubles were pretty bad. I remember being on tour and being in the UK at the time when the child died and just being really sad about it all. These bombs going off in random places, it could have been anyone, you know? So I suppose that's why I was saying it's not me, that even though I'm Irish, it wasn't me." The song was written by O'Riordan originally on acoustic guitar late one night by herself on the group's UK tour. The band would record the song in Dublin with producer Stephen Street, who spent a fair bit of time getting the guitars to sound like other alternative music that was popular at the time. However, O'Riordan would push back against the assertion that the band was capitalizing off the popularity of grunge, revealing, "It came organically because we were using our live instruments, we were plugging in a lot, and we started to mess around with feedback and distortion. When you're on tour, you start to mess around a bit more with the live side of things. There were a lot of bands around that time that were part of the grunge thing, and this wasn't grunge, but the timing was good. We couldn't have really fitted in with grunge because we were a different type of band. We were Irish and from Limerick. We had a lot of our own ideas. A lot of the grunge bands were very similar to each other," she'd say. The Cranberries' former manager Alan Kovac would reveal to Rolling Stone magazine that the group's label, Island Records, urged the Cranberries not to release the politically urgent song as a single. The label offered O'Riordan $1 million to work on a different song, but she ripped up the check, according to Kovac, with him remembering, "Dolores was a very small, fragile person, but very opinionated. Her belief was that she was an international artist and she wanted to break the rest of the world, and Zombie was part of that evolution. She felt the need to expand beyond I love you, you love me, and write about what was happening in Ireland at the time," he'd say. Also helping the song's popularity was a memorable music video which received heavy play on MTV. incorporating footage of the conflict in Northern Ireland, spliced with O'Riordan painted gold and in the company of silver-painted cherubs. The band would turn to director Samuel Baer to direct the video. He had a pretty impressive list of credits up until this point, working on Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit video and Blind Melon's video for No Rain. Baer would fly to Belfast shortly before the ceasefire to get footage of the area, and those are real British soldiers and local children you see in the music video. O'Riordan, for her part, would praise Baer, saying, "I actually thought the director was very brave. When he got back, he was pretty pumped. There was a lot of adrenaline pumping through him. He was telling me how tense it was and how he was blown away by the whole thing. He got footage of the kids jumping from one building to another, and he got a lot of footage of the army. He was a very good director," she'd say. Zombie would end up going #1 in several countries on the rock charts and would be certified platinum in Germany and Australia. The Cranberries got the opportunity to perform the song live at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony to honor those who had brought a peaceful solution to the conflict in Northern Ireland. No need to argue, would go on to sell almost 20 million copies on the strength of the single Zombie. While Zombie on their second album dealt with politics, other songs saw the band looking more inwards, with O'Riordan telling the Washington Post, "The first album was written when I was younger and just kind of getting into things. When I was younger, people would manipulate me more. I was a bit too nice for my own good. You can have the greatest voice and the greatest ambitions, but if you don't know where to tell people to get off, I experienced a lot of betrayal. It's not a lovey-dovey world at all. A lot of songs were confronting different situations." In the same interview, she would allude to former associates with whom the band had ended up at odds with as well. It was during the mid-90s O'Riordan married Duran Duran's tour manager Don Burton, who would soon become the Cranberries' manager. The marriage offered a feeling of protection for O'Riordan, and the success of the Cranberries saw constant comparisons to Harriet Wheeler from the Sundays and Sinead O'Connor. Side note, guys, I've done a whole video on the career of the Sundays. The link is down below. O'Riordan, for her part, would respond to these comparisons, telling the LA Times, "The only thing about being a girl and the lead singer and the main writer is that you're the one the guy tries to fool to get into your pants, and that's happened to me countless amounts of times. There's a lot of chauvinism in the music industry. I'm glad to be married, and that's one of the reasons, so I don't feel exposed anymore that way," she'd say. To support their second album, the band landed some prime spots playing Woodstock 94 and performing an MTV Unplugged set, but things were rocky for the band during the tour to promote the album. The band soon developed a mistrust of the media, and while they were dubbed the New Smiths early on in their career, some in the UK press ignored the band until they finally broke big in America. Soon enough, reports would surface that infighting was brewing within the band, leading to breakup rumors being published quite frequently in the press. Then in the UK, the paper The Daily Star was sued by O'Riordan for claiming she cavorted on stage without underwear during a show in Hamburg, Germany. The newspaper would end up having to issue an apology to the frontwoman and pay her $15,000, which she would donate to charity. The Irish tabloids even sent photographers to wait outside of O'Riordan and her husband's home, scoring a shot of the two shopping that, when published, resulted in rumors of a potential breakup of the band and O'Riordan having a mental breakdown. Her feelings of the media would be captured in the song Free to Decide on their third album. On top of the world, the Cranberries were scheduled to play a free show in Washington, D.C. that turned into a disaster. The local radio station named WHFS sponsored the show with 3,000 people expected to attend, but more than triple that number showed up. There simply weren't enough police to work the event, and given that was a Monday, a lot of kids skipped school, and the station and police were surprised at the audience numbers. The show would start 45 minutes late, and the station's promotions manager would recall to WTOP.com that O'Riordan wasn't in a rush to take the stage, spending time backstage filing her nails. The restless crowd soon started a mosh pit and started stage diving. Once the band hit the stage, they only made it through about a song and a half before the organizers and the police pulled the plug, resulting in angry fans pelting the police and stage with rocks, food, and beer bottles. The band would disappear from the stage and were quickly driven to the airport, and it was reported at the time that O'Riordan's acoustic guitar was stolen in the mayhem. The band would release their third album in 1996, To the Faithful Departed, which was named after a line in a Catholic prayer. The album sold quite well, moving 4 million copies worldwide, but it was a steep drop in sales from their past records. Inspired by the success of Zombie, the band included a few more politically charged songs, including War Child in Bosnia, but tracks like these were called naive by critics. The album would be the first to not feature the infamous Cranberries couch on the front cover. The single Salvation was in response to the spat of musical-related deaths since the band's last album, including Blind Melon's Shannon Hoon, the Smashing Pumpkins' Jonathan Melvoin, Nirvana's Kurt Cobain, Sublime's Bradley Nowell. Side note, guys, I've done videos on all these bands. The link is down below. O'Riordan would admit to Billboard that by 1996 the band was burnt out, admitting, "We overworked ourselves and our hearts weren't in it at all, and everyone could see that. We should have taken a break, but we went back into the studio. A lot of people died around that time and the album was really down. In just 3 years, the band would travel around the world 3 times, taking no longer than a 6-week break. The strain soon started to show on tour for the band, as O'Riordan had to cancel a number of shows after injuring her knee, and only 6 months after their third record came out, the entire tour was called off. Reports at the time cited O'Riordan's health issues as the cause for the cancellation, with it coming out that she was dealing with, and I quote, stress and exhaustion. Following the tour's cancellation, the band members wouldn't meet for several months at a time, while O'Riordan went into seclusion. The Orlando Sentinel interviewed O'Riordan in 1999, where she discussed what was going on behind the scenes, revealing that she had a mental breakdown, but it would be giving birth to her first child that got her through those difficult times, revealing, "If it wasn't for my son, we wouldn't be together at all. I hated singing, I hated being on stage, I hated being in the Cranberries, I was constantly crying. I wanted to be a shopkeeper, a hairdresser, anything. I was so desperate to have a reality, friends, and boring life. I missed that. I wanted to make my own toast in the morning and just call my friend Nora and see what was up. When I got pregnant, I started singing again." By the late 90s, the Cranberries were less focused on album sales and more focused on something more important, happiness. By 1999, they would release their fourth album, Bury the Hatchet, but behind the scenes, there was a lot of moving parts at their record label. Island Records would be scooped up as part of the Universal Polygram merger, and in some respects, the Cranberries were one of the first major releases since the merger took place. While the band had been press shy in more recent years due to their mistrust of the media, for this album, they were venturing out and doing a little more press. The group's fourth album sold around 2.3 million copies worldwide, and it once again went gold in America. That feeling of being in a band instead of possibly becoming a solo artist seemed to reinvigorate O'Riordan, telling Billboard, "Every time I meet solo artists, they look a bit sad. They have nobody to hang around with. When we have a shit gig, I love the fact that we can all go out and get hammered together," she'd say. The band's final release before their long hiatus would be 2002's Wake Up and Smell the Coffee. The album was created by a more mature and happier band whose members were now all married and raising families. O'Riordan would give birth to her second child during the recording of the album, and it would be that life-changing experience that can be heard on songs including Never Grow Old and Pretty Eyes. She would tell the Orlando Sentinel at the time, "It's great to be able to say, oh, this is it. I'm 30 with 2 kids and I've accomplished a lot with the band and I'm still normal." While the band's original recording contract was signed with Island Records in 1991, they were soon transferred to MCA as part of record label mergers and renegotiations. Wake Up and Smell the Coffee would end up being the band's only release on MCA, and it wouldn't even chart in the top 40, but it still ended up selling over 1 million copies worldwide. Despite the lack of album sales, the band was still selling out on tour and bringing in thousands of fans a night. The band, who was unhappy with the promotion that their latest album had received, decided to soon terminate their relationship with their label MCA in 2003. O'Riordan would issue a statement that read, "Since we were signed in 1991 by Island Records, we have gradually seen our label dissolve from a pioneering, independent-spirited label into a corporate monolith that completely lost touch with the group's creative vision. All of the people we have worked with over the years in America and England have been fired or left the company, so the band felt it was time to move on to new opportunities." It was reported at the time that the Cranberries would find a new label and put out a new record, but by the end of 2003, it was announced the members would take a hiatus and pursue individual music careers and spend more time with family. During their time apart, the members would rarely see one another. During their break, O'Riordan recorded several solo albums and collaborated with other artists, and the Cranberries regrouped in 2009, eventually releasing one of their strongest albums to date, Roses. By 2012, O'Riordan's life took a turn for the worst as she was dealing with addiction to pills and alcohol, as well as her marriage falling apart in 2014. The same year, she would be arrested for causing a disturbance on a flight and headbutting a police officer, who she reportedly told, "You can't arrest me, I'm an icon." She would be luckily spared from any jail time, but she would be diagnosed as bipolar. Following the dissolution of her marriage, O'Riordan would relocate to New York City and live in a variety of hotels for the time being, and start up a new band called Dark, along with former Smiths bassist Andy Rourke. Dark would put out their only release in 2016, Science Agrees, and to her bandmates, O'Riordan's mental health seemed to have improved in her later years. Fergal Lawler would look back saying it was only the last few years that she started talking about psychological problems because she didn't know herself. She saw a few different therapists and realized that she had, and she started getting treatment for it, he'd say. While Noel would tell The Guardian, she was a lot more herself, especially the last year when we were rehearsing. You wouldn't even know because they had found the right cocktail, whatever it was she needed to be on. There wasn't even a case of having to work around it. O'Riordan would return to the Cranberries in 2017 with the album Something Else, which was a mixture of older and newer songs that were performed unplugged with an orchestra. That positivity seemed to follow her into 2018 as she was keeping herself busy with work, looking to record the next Dark album. with producer Youth, while also working with the Cranberries, and was planning on recording with American band Bad Wolves a cover of the song Zombie. The day before she was scheduled to show up in the studio with Bad Wolves to record her part for Zombie, she was found dead. The week before O'Riordan was supposed to enter the studio with Bad Wolves, she had flown to London from New York. In the early hours of January 15th, she left 2 voicemails for a label executive named Dan Waite, who she knew from the early 2000s, who had arranged a collaboration with Bad Wolves. Her messages seemed positive, talking about her children, discussing her new project she was working on, as well as discussing her enthusiasm for Bad Wolves' cover. She even expressed excitement over rapper Eminem's sampling Zombie on his song In Your Head. On that same voicemail, she would even sing a bit of the Verve's Bittersweet Symphony, a song that Youth had produced. I've done a whole video on the song and the controversy around it, the link is down below. But sadly, during the morning of January 15th at 9:16 a.m., she was found unresponsive in her bathroom. The cause of death was ruled to be an accidental drowning. Prescription drugs were found in her room, and when they did the autopsy, they were found to be at therapeutic levels in her blood, but her blood alcohol was quite elevated. Just 4 days after her passing, Bad Wolves released their cover of Zombie as a single, where it topped the rock charts for several weeks, and even had crossover appeal peaking at number 54 on the pop charts. While O'Riordan loved the cover that Bad Wolves did of the song, her bandmates didn't feel the same way. Speaking with ABC News Radio, Cranberries drummer Fergal Lawler admitted, "I didn't really like it wasn't my cup of tea," while guitarist Noel Hogan would admit that he thought the cover was released, and I quote, "a bit too soon. For my liking anyways, the whole thing seemed insensitive," or something he would say. Following the death of O'Riordan, Bad Wolves would donate $250,000 from the proceeds of the song to her children. The Cranberries posthumously would release their final record In the End in April of 2019, several months after Dolores' death. The surviving members of the band were able to piece together her demos she had done with the group prior to her death over the course of the last year or so, and they worked with producer Stephen Street once again. Following the death of O'Riordan, the surviving members of the Cranberries would announce that they would be disbanding.